Black teen humiliated during will reading, until they realized she inherited everything. The cutting glances followed Maya from the moment she entered the lawyer's office. 17 years old, with black skin, natural curly hair, and dressed in simple clothes, she was all too familiar with the way people saw her in this kind of space. She didn't belong here, not in this room full of people dressed in designer clothes and expensive colognes. It was a place for those who had always had everything, a place for power, wealth, and status. Maya had none of those things. The whispers started before she even sat down. "Who let the cleaning lady in here?" Victor Almeida, the nephew of the late Eduardo Almeida, sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. It was followed by stifled laughter, the kind that cut deep. Maya kept her gaze fixed on the empty chair in the center of the room. She could feel the weight of their judgment, could almost taste the contempt they felt for her. Her Aunt Christina, decked out in expensive jewelry and a designer dress, didn't even bother to lower her voice. "It must be another one of my brother's social causes," she said. "She's probably here asking for a donation." Maya took a deep breath, pushing down the sting of their words. They were like knives, but she wouldn't let them see how much they hurt her. Her eyes swept the walls, the photos of exotic vacations, the framed certificates, the signs of the empire Eduardo Almeida had built. His empire. The empire that Maya had never been a part of, but that, somehow, she was now a part of. "The girl is probably lost," Ricardo, the eldest son of the Almeida family, remarked with an air of superiority. "Someone should escort her out before Mr. Garcia arrives." "It's embarrassing." Maya's lips curled into the smallest of smiles. No one noticed. The door opened, and in walked Enrique Garcia, the family lawyer for 30 years, carrying a brown briefcase. His wrinkled face showed no emotion as he greeted the family with a short nod, before his eyes turned to Maya. "Miss Maya," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Please." The room fell into stunned silence. Victor nearly choked on his champagne. Christina clutched her designer purse, her knuckles turning white with the force of her grip. "Excuse me, Garcia," Ricardo interrupted, his voice tight with disbelief. "But do you know this girl?" Garcia's gaze swept over the family members before answering calmly. "Of course, you should all know her too. This is Maya Oliveira, Dona Celeste's daughter." He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "Maya has worked in this house since she was 12, helping her mother with cleaning on weekends." "The maid's daughter," Christina spat, her voice thick with disdain. "What is she doing at a private family reading of a will?" Maya sat down in the chair Garcia had indicated, her posture straight, her face serene, despite the growing hostility. She refused to let them see how much she ached, how much their words dug into her soul. This was not the moment for weakness. This was the moment she had been preparing for, though she had no idea just how much it would change her life. Enrique Garcia opened his briefcase with slow, deliberate movements. "We are all gathered here today for the reading of the final will of Eduardo Almeida," he announced formally. "The late businessman passed away 3 weeks ago after a battle with cancer." The atmosphere in the room was tense, but the family's expressions seemed to soften for a moment. There were no words for grief, only the quiet acknowledgement that a great man had passed. But that moment was brief, and soon, the uncomfortable glances returned. Maya's Aunt Patricia, who had been absorbed in her phone, took a picture of Maya without hesitation, typing a quick caption. #IntruderWillReading, she posted online, adding, "Lackey trying to pull a fast one even after their boss is dead." The comment quickly gathered likes and shares, the public humiliation of Maya already underway. Victor leaned in, whispering to those around him. "I bet my uncle left some change for charity," he said. "Maybe 10,000 Ray for the girl. Maybe some nonsense." But Maya didn't react. She kept her eyes on Garcia's hands as he pulled out the sealed envelope. To them, she was invisible, nothing more than the subject of cruel jokes. Before Garcia began, he spoke again, his voice calm but filled with authority. "Before we begin, Eduardo left a video that should be shown first. It will help explain some of the decisions he made in his will." Ricardo rolled his eyes. "Another one of my father's little plays," he muttered. Let's just get down to business. Garcia ignored him and activated a screen embedded in the wall. The face of Eduardo Almeida appeared on the screen, aged by illness but still filled with the kind of determination that had made him a legend in the business world. If you are watching this, then I have left this world, Eduardo's voice crackled through the speakers. And I imagine you are eager to know how I have divided my estate. He paused, his eyes seeming to look directly at each person in the room, even though the recording had been made weeks ago. But before that, Eduardo continued, I have a question for you. Can any of you tell me the name of Dona Celeste's daughter? The room went silent. Ricardo frowned, looking around in confusion. Victor scratched the back of his neck. Cristina pretended to examine her fingernails, her face flushed with discomfort. I figured you wouldn't, Eduardo's voice continued, a sad smile playing at the corners of his lips. That girl has been working in our house for 5 years, helping her mother since she was 12. And none of you, my own family, ever bothered to learn her name. Maya felt a lump form in her throat as the truth of Eduardo's words washed over her. She had watched how the family had treated her and others who worked in the house. She had witnessed how they'd been ignored, dismissed, and humiliated. But she never allowed herself to break under the weight of it. I watched how you treated her, Eduardo's voice continued, how you treated all the employees, as if they were invisible, disposable. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. The tension in the room was unbearable. Patricia had dropped her phone. Victor swallowed hard. Ricardo shifted uncomfortably in his. The room fell silent, the words Eduardo Almeida had left behind hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Maya's heart raced in her chest, but she refused to let the tension show on her face. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry, not after everything she had endured. Not after everything her mother had gone through. Garcia, the family lawyer, remained calm as he clicked a button, bringing the screen back to life. Eduardo's face appeared again, looking even more fragile than before, yet his eyes held a kind of clarity that could not be denied. Now that I have addressed my family's neglect, let me tell you the truth about Maya, Eduardo's voice echoed through the room, leaving a palpable silence in its wake. She is extraordinary. She has worked tirelessly for years, not only for her mother but for others as well. She studied late into the night, cared for Dona Celeste while working, and read the books in my library during her breaks. Maya's fingers tightened around the armrest, and she took a deep breath. She wasn't sure if the words Eduardo spoke were meant to comfort her or to dismantle the world around her, but either way, they were truths that no one could ignore. I noticed her, Eduardo continued, his voice growing more determined, while you ignored her. The way she studied. The way she helped. It was this simple, genuine compassion that stood out to me, something I never saw in any of you. Victor, who had been sipping his champagne, nearly choked at the unexpected compliment. Cristina's face was flushed with embarrassment. Ricardo, already uncomfortable, gripped the edge of his chair as though he might jump up at any moment and protest. But Garcia remained unmoved, his eyes scanning the family with quiet authority. Mr. Ricardo will likely question the legality of all of this, Eduardo's recorded voice continued, but I assure you, it is all in perfect legal order. There was a slight pause before Eduardo added, the truth is, I spent months talking to Maya. I watched how she cared for her mother, how she dreamed of studying law, and I saw in her a strength I never saw in any of you. The lawyer shifted slightly, as if anticipating what was to come next. Maya's story is a tale of resilience. Not just surviving, but thriving despite the cruelty she's faced. And now, you will all see just how much she has already inherited. Ricardo couldn't hold back any longer. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. This is ridiculous, he spat. You can't possibly expect me to believe that this girl, the maid's daughter, is inheriting anything from my uncle. This is absurd. We're his family, not her. Garcia raised a hand, signaling for Ricardo to settle down. The lawyer's expression remained neutral. If you'll allow me to continue, Mr. Ricardo, he said calmly. I have only just begun reading. Maya felt a surge of nervousness, but she didn't let it show. She had always been taught to keep her emotions in check. She had learned the hard way how easily they could be used against her. But today was different. Today, everything was about to change. Garcia cleared his throat and began to read from the will. I, Eduardo Almeida, leave to Maya Oliveira 51% of the shares of Almeida Incorporados, my primary residence, and all properties listed in Appendix A, as well as the sum of 20 million Ray in various investments. The room was instantly filled with shocked gasps. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had expected some kind of inheritance, but this was everything. This was the empire she had never imagined would be hers. Victor's face turned an unhealthy shade of red as he sputtered in disbelief. "This is undue influence," he shouted, his voice cracking with anger. That girl must have manipulated him, convinced him to leave her everything. Garcia remained calm. "Everything is in perfect legal order, Mr. Victor," he replied, his voice steady. "There are conditions attached to this inheritance, as Mr. Eduardo stipulated. Maya will only take full control of the company when she turns 21. Until then, the company will be managed by a board, led by myself and Dr. Luisa Mendez." Dr. Luisa Mendez, a middle-aged black woman, stepped into the room at that moment. She was dressed in an elegant suit, but her eyes were focused on Maya with an expression of recognition, and something deeper, something unspoken. "Dr. Mendez," Garcia continued, "was not just Eduardo's doctor. She is the one who introduced Maya to Eduardo after witnessing how Maya cared for Dona Celeste in the hospital, even after you, Cristina, fired her when her mother became ill." Cristina's face turned a deep crimson. Her hands trembled as she clutched her purse, her eyes darting around the room to avoid everyone's gaze. She hadn't expected this. None of them had. "I studied with Dona Celeste many years ago," Dr. Luisa said softly, her voice warm and reassuring. "When I found her in the hospital, battling the same cancer that took Eduardo, I saw Maya. I saw the same strength in her that I saw in my friend all those years ago." The silence in the room was deafening. For the first time, Maya felt seen, truly seen. Not as the maid's daughter, but as someone worthy of admiration, of respect. Maya's thoughts raced, but she kept her face calm. Eduardo had spent his final months not only observing her but learning about her. Learning about the kindness, the compassion, and the resilience that defined her. And now, she was inheriting everything. But the inheritance wasn't just about money or property. It was about something far more valuable. It was a legacy of justice, of a chance to right the wrongs that had been done, not only to her but to everyone who had been mistreated, ignored, and erased. Garcia flipped open another envelope, revealing a second document. "There is one more video," he announced. "Eduardo asked that it only be shown if there is a dispute regarding his will. And I believe there is." With a click, the screen came back to life. Eduardo's frail face appeared again. His eyes were sharp, filled with determination. "If you are watching this," Eduardo's voice began, "it means." The room remained heavy with shock as Eduardo's words continued to reverberate in their minds. The once untouchable Almeida family was now facing the consequences of their years of privilege and cruelty, laid bare for all to see. Ricardo stood, pacing frantically, his face pale, his hands shaking. "This can't be happening," he muttered to himself, as though trying to convince himself that the reality around him wasn't true. Garcia remained unmoved, a quiet witness to the unfolding scene. He adjusted his glasses, then turned his gaze to Maya, who sat quietly, calm and composed despite the chaos. "This isn't over," Ricardo snapped, his voice tinged with desperation. "I will contest this will. No one can do this to us. You're not my father's heir. None of this is legal." Maya's gaze shifted to Ricardo, her eyes cool but unwavering. "Your father's empire was never really yours to begin with," she replied, her voice steady. "It was built on the backs of people like my mother and me. It was built on the exploitation of others, all of you riding on the coattails of the poor. The only thing your family built was a legacy of cruelty, and it's time for that to end." There was a moment of stunned silence. For the first time, Maya wasn't just the invisible maid's daughter. She was the one who was speaking truth to power, the one with the courage to challenge everything they had known. Victor's sneer returned, but there was no confidence behind it. He tried to regain control. You can't just take everything. This company is ours. My uncle would never have left everything to you. You're just a girl, he spat, his words filled with venom. Maya didn't flinch. Your great-uncle didn't leave it to me because of who I am, she said softly, but because of who you are not. You never cared about the people who worked for you. You never saw them. You never saw me. Her words cut deeper than any of the insults they had thrown at her. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink, the air thick with the realization that Maya was not the helpless figure they had tried to paint her as. She was the force that would reshape their world, a reminder that their wealth and power could no longer protect them from accountability. Garcia cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention back to him. If I may continue, he said, there are terms to this inheritance, as I mentioned before. Maya remained calm, her eyes meeting each of the family members in turn. Her presence alone seemed to be enough to rattle them. The company will remain in the hands of a board of directors, Garcia said, until Maya reaches the age of 21. During this time, the company will be managed by a board, led by myself and Dr. Luisa Mendez. The door opened, and Dr. Luisa stepped forward, her confident stride filling the room. She was a stark contrast to the rigid, aristocratic figures surrounding her. Her eyes met Maya's, a silent bond between them that spoke volumes. She's not just the company's doctor, Garcia continued. She is also an ally to Maya, someone who has supported her for months and who understands the power of compassion over cruelty. Dr. Luisa gave a slight nod, her voice calm but firm. I have worked with this family for many years, she said. I have witnessed firsthand the way they treat their employees. But Maya is different. She has a vision. She has integrity. And that's why we're all here today. Not just because of her inheritance, but because of the change she will bring. Christina's face was bright red, her eyes darting around the room as though looking for a way to escape. This is madness, she exclaimed. You can't do this. Eduardo would never have allowed this. Eduardo's voice suddenly filled the room again, as Garcia clicked another button on the console. You're right, Christina. I would never have allowed this, if I didn't know the truth about you. If I hadn't seen the way you treated others. You think Maya is just a maid's daughter, but you're wrong. She's the future of this company. She's the future of what we can become if we choose to make the right decisions. Christina's hands shook as she gripped her purse, her carefully constructed facade cracking. Maya's words echoed in her mind. You never saw me. For the first time, Christina realized how much she had overlooked, how blind she had been to the lives and people her wealth had hidden behind its gilded walls. Garcia flipped to the next page, his voice cold and matter-of-fact. And there are conditions to Maya's inheritance. These are not just legalities, they are moral imperatives. Maya stood up from her seat, her presence commanding the room. First, she said, her voice carrying authority, I will be redistributing the wealth accumulated from properties that were obtained through questionable means. These properties will be returned to the communities from which they were taken. I have already signed the documents, and the transfer is in process. The people who were displaced by the Almeida family's greed will get their homes back, free of charge. The room erupted in protests. What? Victor roared. You can't do that. Those properties are worth millions. You'll bankrupt the company. I'm not here to bankrupt anyone, Maya said quietly. I'm here to give back what was stolen. The finality of her words left no room for argument. For the first time, the Almeida family was seeing the consequences of their actions, not just through the legal papers Garcia held, but through Maya's vision of justice. Ricardo's face was ashen. But you'll ruin the company. The shareholders will abandon us. You'll destroy everything my father built. Your father built nothing, Maya retorted. Your father took from the land and from people. He built an empire on the backs of the poor. What you're calling an empire is nothing but a house of cards built on exploitation. My goal is to transform it. Transform everything it stands for. Dr. Luisa spoke again, her voice gentle but unwavering. And that transformation begins today. Maya's first act as the majority shareholder is not to punish, but to restore fairness. She is compensating employees who were unfairly dismissed over the past decade, including those who were fired for trying to form a union. Maya turned to the screen, where live footage now played. Former employees, many in tears, were being called back to their old jobs. They were receiving severance pay, a gesture of respect long denied to them by the Almeida family. The sight was moving, as people who had been treated like invisible cogs in a machine were finally receiving the recognition they deserved. "This is not revenge," Maya said, her voice steady. "This is reparation." The room grew quiet, the weight of her words sinking in. "We are building anew." Weeks passed, and the once opulent and imposing Almeida headquarters transformed before the world's eyes. What had been a monument to excess was becoming a symbol of change, a place where power was being redefined. Maya's vision for the future had begun to take root, and the world was starting to take notice. The reactions from the Almeida family were varied. Ricardo, unable to come to terms with the loss of control, continued to fight in court. Each legal battle he lost only deepened his bitterness. He refused to accept Maya's terms, insisting that the company was his birthright. Yet with each loss, he sank further, his wealth slowly being consumed by mounting legal fees. He could no longer afford the luxury he once took for granted. The elegant suits, the expensive cars, all of it was gone. And what remained was a man who had once been arrogant and powerful, now reduced to fighting for scraps. Victor, too, struggled. His once imposing demeanor had turned frail. The realization that he would never reclaim the power he had enjoyed under his father's empire was too much to bear. The social media posts he had once relished, mocking Maya and her family, now lay in ruins, a testament to his own failure. His followers had abandoned him after his cruel remarks went viral, and the stigma attached to him was permanent. Patricia, on the other hand, had been the first to accept Maya's social awareness program. Humiliated after her post about Maya went viral in a negative light, her career as an influencer shattered. But Patricia was trying to make amends. She had started working with marginalized communities, learning about the struggles they faced, and slowly, her perspective had changed. It wasn't easy, but she knew she had to try. And then there was Christina, who had once been so dismissive of Maya. She had started taking part in the program, attending workshops on diversity and inclusion, and volunteering in the very communities she had once ignored. But the change was slow. The shame and guilt from her actions weighed heavily on her, and she found herself questioning everything she had known. But no one felt the weight of change more than the workers, the men and women who had been the true backbone of the Almeida Empire. They were the ones who, for years, had been treated as invisible, disposable. But now, they were seeing the fruits of their struggle. Maya had made it clear that their hard work would not go unrecognized. They were being paid fair wages. They were given opportunities to advance. And for the first time, they had a voice at the table. The new board of directors, made up of former employees who had been sidelined for decades, was a testament to Maya's commitment to change. People like Carlos Mendez, a former finance department head, and Maria Costa, a former warehouse supervisor, now sat in positions of power, making decisions that reflected the needs of those who had been overlooked for so long. Maya had even created a foundation to help young people from marginalized communities get access to education and career opportunities. The first major project the foundation took on was a partnership with local schools to provide scholarships for students from underprivileged backgrounds. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. The headquarters of Almeida Incorporados was no longer just a place of business. It was a place of transformation. The building, once filled with exclusive offices and glossy boardrooms, now had a community center on its ground floor, where young people were taught classes in entrepreneurship, technology, and civil rights. Art from local artists now adorned the walls, replacing the expensive, impersonal portraits of European painters that once dominated the space. The company's profits, once focused solely on the wealth of the Almeida family, now prioritized social responsibility. The employee profit-sharing program was a success, and productivity had reached new heights. The difference in the work environment was palpable. People were happier. They were more invested in the company's success because, for the first time, they saw themselves reflected in its future. Maya had become a symbol of hope and change. Her story, one of resilience and compassion, inspired countless others. She was no longer just the daughter of a maid. She was the architect of a new vision for what a company could be, a company that wasn't built on exploitation but on fairness, empathy, and shared success. And it wasn't just the employees who saw the change. The public, too, had taken notice. Journalists from around the world had begun to write about Almeida Incorporo's transformation. The company was being studied in business schools, praised for its innovative approach to social responsibility and its commitment to fairness. Maya was being invited to speak at conferences, not just as a businesswoman but as a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of how true leadership could be defined by compassion rather than power. But it wasn't just about what Maya had built, it was about what she had prevented. The Almeida family, once poised to destroy everything Maya had created, were now struggling to maintain their relevance. Ricardo, though still bitter, had lost the fight. His refusal to accept Maya's terms had cost him everything. He had tried to salvage his dignity by suing for a portion of the company, but each court ruling against him only made him look more desperate. His debts continued to grow, and soon he was forced to sell his remaining assets just to stay afloat. One afternoon, as Maya walked through the halls of the newly transformed headquarters, she passed a TV screen in the lobby. A news report was on, showing the fall of the Almeida family. Ricardo's bankruptcy was headline news, and Patricia was being interviewed about her experience with the social awareness program. Maya watched as her once wealthy relatives were now struggling to rebuild their lives. Ricardo was being interviewed in a small, run-down office, his former arrogance replaced with defeat. "I never thought it would come to this," he said, his voice low. "I thought we were untouchable. But now, I realize. Maya was right. We were never the ones who built this company. We just took advantage of it. And now, we've lost everything." Maya didn't feel satisfaction in his words. There was no joy in seeing his downfall. For all the wrong he had done, all the lives he had trampled on, Maya knew that the true victory was in what she had built, not in what she had destroyed. As she watched the news report, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Dr. Luisa standing beside her, a warm smile on her face. "You've done it," Dr. Luisa said softly. "You've changed everything." Maya smiled.